Welcome to Love and Leadership, the podcast that helps you lead with both your head and your heart, plus a bit of humor. I'm Kristen Sharkey, a leadership coach and facilitator.
And I'm Mike Sharkey, a senior living and hospitality executive. We're a couple of leadership nerds who also happen to be a couple.
Join us each week as we share our unfiltered opinions, break down influential books, and interview inspiring guests.
Whether you're a seasoned executive or a rising star, we're here to help you level up your leadership game and amplify your impact.
Hello and welcome back to Love and Leadership. I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
And today we are doing an LBC, Leadership Book Club.
LBC.
Episode, and we are doing Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss.
Well, welcome back. I know we took last week off. Kristen is very chagrined to discuss that at all. We had some family stuff, and thank you for bearing with us.
Yes.
If you even noticed that we were off last week.
We won't do that often.
Time has a different flow nowadays, I think, with the constant flood of information. We took off one Jeremy Biramy. And any fan of The Good Place will know how long that was. Basically one dot of the I off. So
yes.
Thank you. Welcome back. This week, Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. This is a really great book. I've read it before a few years ago. I don't know that I've applied a lot of the negotiating parts of it. I'm starting to add those into my repertoire, but there's a lot of good psychology in here about evaluating the people that you're dealing with, working with, and understanding who they are, their patterns and things like that, and how best to talk to them. So even if you're not a negotiator by trade, and he talks about negotiation is life. So he has a lot of fun examples of how he gets a better deal on a car or when he's checking into a hotel. So lots of good stuff. Let's dive right in. Chris Voss is an American businessman, author, and academic. Mr. Voss is a former FBI hostage negotiator, the CEO of the Black Swan Group Limited, and co-author of the book Never Split the Difference. He is an adjunct professor at Harvard Law School, Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business, and lecturer at the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California.
My alma mater.
Dun, dun, dun.
I don't think that's the appropriate sound
well,
effect.
so Kristen actually likes football, and it's.
We don't need to talk about USC this year.
Well, I don't even. Do they have a football team? Okay, and she watches the games and stuff. It's so I don't want to say out of character, but it's pretty cute. Anyway.
Well, anyway, I did graduate from my undergrad was through the Marshall School of Business at USC. So, of course, I have to say, fight on.
I see. Okay.
You're allowed to move on now.
Did you ever attend a lecture of Chris?
No.
Over his FBI career, he was invited more and more to these schools that do negotiations classes and things like that. And generally, at least to his telling, he ran circles around people. And I think the overarching theme of this book is going to be street knowledge is far more effective than academic knowledge when it comes to dealing with people. And I personally, having worked in restaurants for almost 20 years, can tell you no one knows psychology better than a long tenured waiter. We can read you pretty quickly. And so, okay, originally a Kansas City beat cop, Mr. Voss eventually joined the NYPD and became a member of the New York City Joint Terrorism Task Force from 1986 to 2000. He spent 24 years working in the FBI Crisis Negotiation Unit and was the FBI's chief international hostage and kidnapping negotiator from 2003 to 2007. After working on more than 150 international hostage crises, he retired from the FBI in 2007 and founded the Black Swan Group. The Black Swan Group serves as a consultancy firm and trainer for both businesses and individuals on negotiation skills. Co-writer is Tal Raz, a journalist and author. I looked him up. He seems mostly to co-write books. I don't think he's a supporting author, so that makes sense. Interestingly enough, collaborator. If you don't know this, the NYPD is quite a bit larger than the FBI. The NYPD is one of, if you compared to many standing armies, is quite large. which kind of makes sense. So, overview, Never Split the Difference is a book on business negotiation, but really it's about the psychology of human interaction and how to maximize your results in dealing with other people. Chris had a very unique experience of being part of the growing understanding of negotiations under extremely high stakes situations. When he started in the 1970s, the whole like hostage negotiator thing that we're all so familiar with nowadays didn't exist. And the FBI and the police force, their negotiation tactic was, let's stall until we can effect a military resolution to this problem. It wasn't really trying to, do business with these people and negotiate. So anyway, chapter 1, the new rules. And Mr. Voss, he recounts an experience during a hostage role play scenario at Harvard. He goes into quickly, we see the difference between academic theory and an experienced negotiator who is relying on their understanding of human psychology. We are introduced to the concept of open-ended questions, which he refers to as calibrated questions. In this book, you're going to see 3 or 4 basic techniques that you can use pretty much in every scenario. And calibrated questions are one of the foundations of negotiation and really discussion with people. So he has a fun scenario where he negotiates circles around some of the Harvard students by just asking them the same question over and over. And they're trying to get money out of him in a business negotiation. And he just keeps saying, I don't know how I can do that. And they wind up negotiating with themselves. And this is one of his foundational techniques, was he just asks people, I'm not sure how I can do that. And when you say that to someone who's like asking you for money, or they start to negotiate with themselves, they start to try and solve your problem. And that's interesting. So he goes through another class he was part of at Harvard, where he is the only outsider. Even though he's negotiating with highly educated students with modern business learnings, he puts them through their paces. And as I said, the overarching theme of this book is that real world experience and a fairly basic understanding of human psychology are more useful than most academic classes and theories. And I don't think Mr. Voss could necessarily be my therapist, but he knows how people work.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Like, he spent some time in this section talking about the book that I think it was considered the foundation of, or like the book on negotiation, which is called Getting to Yes. And he kind of juxtaposes it to the stuff he's going to cover in this book, which are much more like practical tactics versus Getting to Yes is pretty theory-based. This was my first time reading this book, but I've read Getting to Yes actually as part of a class on negotiation for my master's program. So it's interesting to see his take on it.
Yeah, I know we get into this later, but he actually talks about you shouldn't be trying to get to yes, you should be trying to get to no. And because people will give you a lot of yeses that aren't a real yes. And he, later on, I think I go into it, he gives the example of a telemarketer who calls you at home when you're at dinner. And the first question they ask is this a good time? Or do you have time to talk? And what they should really be asking, is this a bad time? Okay. So he had a good example of like a political research call, and usually they're trying to elicit a yes. Like, do you think candidate A is the best choice for the election? Of course, you say yes. But what they should be asking you is, do you really think that if nothing changes, that the country's headed for its best days yet? And if what they're really trying to do is get you to give money to oppose, the answer you will say is, no, I don't think that. And all of a sudden, you're not agreeing. You're just not agreeing to agree. You're agreeing in actuality. So we'll delve into that more. But the basis of Chris's teachings and his techniques are that human beings are often illogical, and they're driven by many different factors, including emotional reasonings, personal perceptions, hidden desires, outside pressures, etc. No one is a truly rational actor, and academic approaches that presuppose this are doomed to fail. The turning point in negotiation theory was in 1971 during an airline hijacking that was handled very badly. Soon after this, the NYPD undertook the creation of a special division for negotiations. They got smacked down by a judge who very clearly elucidated that their techniques should have relied far more on discussing things with the hostage taker who was talking to them, and instead they tried to press a military solution, and they ended up getting people killed unnecessarily. So he references Daniel Kahneman's work in behavioral economics, where Mr. Kahneman found similar problems with academic economic theories in that they discount the fact that humans are not really rational beings. And he's the founder of behavioral economics. Mr. Voss states that negotiation is largely working with or exploiting your counterpart's system one thinking, as described in Daniel's Thinking Fast and Slow. So you're kind of hacking into the reactions that you're going to get by doing certain things with system one. And the best skill you can develop as a negotiator is listening. Everyone wants to be understood, and people can tell when you're really listening to them, even in high stakes, high pressure, high stress scenarios. So his core technique with this is tactical empathy. That is, you have to deal with system one emotional and cognitive biases before you can engage someone's system two rational thinking and actually solve problems. Mr. Voss sees these skills as not just as negotiation, but as life skills, saying in this world, you get what you ask for. You just have to ask correctly. Yeah.
I do love that he brings in thinking fast and slow. And the system one, system two thinking. We've talked about it a lot on this podcast. But
yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty fabulous book, and a lot of...
It'll be an LBC eventually, I'm sure.
Oh, I thought we did the...
We haven't done Thinking Fast and Slow.
We haven't?
No. We talked about it a lot, the concepts a lot.
We didn't actually do it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the list.
It's on the list. Okay. Chapter 2, Be a Mirror. So he goes through a bank robbery he negotiated for in Brooklyn, where they take hostages, and they didn't really have a great plan. When the police go in, they don't actually know that. They don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know how many people are the hostage takers. They're operating from a place of scarcity. The beginning of Chris honing these techniques is this. He starts by, and the book is them learning how to do this, him learning how to do this. And we all see in movies nowadays this very organized hostage negotiator kung fu, if you will, but they don't have that back in the day. They're making this up, and they make a lot of mistakes. He starts just asking a lot of calibrated questions to the main kidnapper to find out what's really going on. How did they get to this point? And he introduces the concept of the late night FM DJ radio voice, which I may or may not have. And it's designed to calm a situation or counterpart down. And technically, we're biologically wired to respond to a deep male voice. Especially a reassuring one.
I do wonder about the research, how that holds for women's voices, because that is a very stereotypically male voice. There might be something to lower tones of voices in general, but that was the only thing I thought of that. I'm like,
I know that's a little stereotypical. I know we can look that up. I know there's research into frequency and how it responds. And an infant's crying is very high pitched. And you are designed, I know this for a fact, biologically designed not to be able to ignore that.
Yeah.
So this is maybe an oversimplification, but I don't know. You fall asleep with me listening to the Fall of Civilizations podcast, and that gentleman has a very soothing, not super low, but lowish. He speaks slowly. His enunciation is very clear. He's calm when he's talking. There's something to that. We can look into it more.
Yeah. But he talks about there being 3 voices that you use during a negotiation process. And one of them is the firm commanding voice. And he's you use this very rarely, which I think is counter to what a lot of people would assume. And the one you're using most of the time is actually a positive, playful tone of voice. And then you switch into the late night FM radio DJ voice as needed to help calm the situation. But I thought one of the interesting things he talked about with voices is when you're using the positive, playful voice, his advice is to smile while you're talking. Hey there. You know how easy it is to get caught up in the day-to-day grind of leadership? putting out fires, dealing with endless emails, back-to-back meetings. Before you know it, you've lost sight of the bigger picture. If you're feeling overwhelmed or disconnected from your leadership purpose, I've got something for you. And it's completely free. It's a 5-day leadership reset challenge I've put together. Each day you'll spend just 10 to 15 minutes on a quick exercise. We'll help you get clear on your vision again, boost your confidence, improve how you communicate, and more. If this sounds like something you could use, check out the show notes, or you can go directly to llpod.link/challenge to get your free challenge guide. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Now back to the show.
I found, again, things in here. This is one of the books I read very early on in my leadership journey, along with It's Your Ship. And I find there's some things in here that I've incorporated that are automatic at this point. And these voices, especially the light, playful voice, I'm not super playful at work exactly, but I try and speak, like he says, with a smile in my voice. And I find that it smooths the wheels of everybody likes somebody who's happy. Everybody likes a boss who isn't too stern, and everybody likes somebody they can get along with.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good way to trick yourself into taking on that tone of voice, especially in situations where you might be nervous or like a phone interview even. So I just thought that was a good piece of advice.
Yeah. He continues, assumptions blind, hypotheses guide. A good negotiator will hold multiple hypotheses at once. The main goal at the beginning of an interaction is just discovery. So this stuff is super useful for salespeople, and I think he has they do consulting for a lot of sales companies or departments, that kind of thing. So in the beginning, just finding out as much information as possible. And, I find this out for myself. Sometimes this is antithetical to very intelligent people who often feel like they can see the whole picture. We're not always super curious about other people. We're aloof, arrogant, whatever you want to say. But especially in the beginning, you just want to ask lots of calibrated questions and find out as much information as you can. In the beginning of a negotiation, it's not about what you say. You want to make the other person and what they have to say the entirety of your focus. The more someone feels heard and the more they feel their needs are being addressed, the more their emotional state will calm down, and you can actually then get to like system 2, rational thinking. Mirroring is repeating the last 1 to 3 words that your counterpart says. When you do this, people feel you are listening to them and they will keep talking. So it says, after you mirror someone, practice silence, at least 4 seconds. My wife added there.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that.
Which feels, by the way, when you're just training this and learning how to add silence into conversations, this is also used in coaching training a lot, because part of that is getting used to silence, and actually viewing silence as a gift. 4 seconds will feel like a million years when you're first getting into this and learning to just let silence happen.
It's so long.
Yeah, but it's really good.
And I do want to say I am by no means a master or even an intermediate at negotiation or anything like that. But these techniques and principles are very useful just in daily life. The whole practice silence thing I adopted in interviews. I will let people just speak, and I will let the questions that I ask sometimes just sit there, and they'll have to think, and I will resist the urge to fill the uncomfortable silence. And later he'll break down, there's 3 overarching personality types, and each one reacts to silence very differently. So, and mirroring works especially well with the kind of authoritative driver type. They love that you're listening to what they're saying. And I am not. I'm an analyst. My wife's an analyst also. But if you find somebody who's like a driver personality and you just keep repeating the last like 3 words in a questioning tone of voice, they will go for hours and they won't even notice that you're doing it to them. They love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People love hearing themselves talk and love hearing their own words repeated back to them. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Kristen noticed when I was doing it to her because she's an analyst and like, why are you doing that? But a more like I don't want to say type A. I don't know if that's, but like a driver, archetypical businessman. boss kind of guy. They love to hear their words repeated back to them. Anyway, so we'll move on. Chapter 3, don't feel their pain, label it. So this chapter is all about labeling. Instead of pretending emotions don't exist or following a lot of prevailing academic literature of trying to separate problems from people, good negotiators identify in emotions and label them openly. Labeling is verbalizing someone's emotions. Even if you are not correct, they will correct you and give you more perspective on them. He discusses that you don't need to agree with someone's emotions or position, just identify them. I can tell you that works in dating also. There was a time in New York when I was studying how to talk to girls because I was so bad at it. And New York girls are especially intimidating. They're used to being found attractive all day long. You walk out on the street and there's men asking you out, telling you're pretty all day long. And you have to really figure out how to break through that and get some attention from them. And one of the things is you just make assumptions and say stuff like, oh, it seems like you're angry, or it seems like you guys are sisters, or it seems like you and your friends are having a good time. And it doesn't matter. Even if you're wrong, they will correct you and keep the conversation going.
Interesting.
It really works. You just make some assumptions and put it out there. People, as long as you're not too like audacious, you can be a little audacious actually. As long as you're not disrespectful and you're and you're playful about it, they will continue the conversation with you. Labeling an emotion reduces its impact and is a shortcut to trust and intimacy. Label can sound like something, it seems like paying your bill on time is important to you. If you're talking to someone, you're trying to get them to pay a bill. It sounds like, it seems like, it feels like, but not. What I'm hearing is because the I makes it about you.
Yeah.
Small difference, but big. And I've had bosses that have said that. What I'm hearing is it's actually intimidating because now, instead of them identifying with you, they're dragging you into their like expectations or a tacit accusation that you're not living up to something. What I'm hearing is you think that's okay. I really had a boss that said that to me once. What I'm hearing is you think that's acceptable.
Oof.
Yeah, just so you know, that's when I started looking for a new job, sir. Because
yeah. No, it's interesting. This is definitely a technique that we train in improv specifically because it really helps drive a scene when you label the emotions your scene partner is having. It's also a coaching technique too. So yeah, it has a lot of uses.
yeah,
It's a good thing to just start trying out a lot of potential.
yeah, a lot of these techniques, just try them out a little bit. There's really there's calibrated questions, there's labeling. We'll get to the rest, but you can try them out just in conversation with your friends. Like, it sounds like you're upset right now, or it sounds like you're really happy. Either one, they're going to talk to you about it.
Yeah, because people will correct you.
They'll correct you, but if they are happy, they'll
as
be
long
like,
as you leave space for them.
you gotta leave space, but it's going to it's going to grease the wheels of human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Go right at negative emotions and situations. He takes a trip to Canada and fails to ask permission of the lead FBI agent in the country for country clearance. And this person could actually bounce him right back out the door, even though he was sent on a FBI mission. Instead of tiptoeing around the issue, he calls the guy and says right out that he messed up. Actually, he says, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And he keeps doing it. And he's, "I'm sorry, I forgot to." And the guy's like, that's fine. And stamps his passport or whatever the equivalent is. So owning up to that stuff I've found very useful to bosses. Like, I'll say, "I'm sorry, I have not dug into this. I know I should have. I've been busy. I'm going to make it a priority." They accept that, you know?
Yeah.
One of the things he teaches is the accusation audit, verbalizing and honestly addressing any negativity, whether real or perceived, allows us to get to a place of empathy. So you could say to someone, you probably think I'm being unreasonable right now. 9 out of 10 times they're going to take your side and be like, "No, you're not unreasonable. You're just asking for what you need." And yeah.
Yeah, he uses this as an exercise to go through and have prepared going into negotiation is what are all the negative things that the person could potentially believe about you, and just putting them all out in the open and then seeing what they respond to, which is very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll diffuse it.
Yep.
You can say things like, you probably think I'm being unfair. You must think I don't really want this deal to go through. That kind of stuff is super works. And interestingly, in one study, Matthew Lieberman at the University of California runs brain imaging of people who are shown photos of others experiencing strong emotion. While looking at these photos, the subject's amygdala, meaning the people that were looking at the photos, their brain registers fear and shows a lot of brain activity. When the subject is asked to label those emotions, like this person looks scared or this person looks angry, the activity in their brain switches to the area that controls rational thought and the fear diminishes. So I think the uncertainty of it all is more scary than the actual scary stuff. Yeah, I want to look up some of these studies, but I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no.
Neuroscience, man. Cool. Chapter 4, Beware Yes, Master No. So here he discusses the very famous book, Getting to Yes. Instead of getting to yes, you're actually trying to get to know. Find the barriers, the objections, the hidden agendas, the unnoticed stakeholders. That's very important, like who's really involved in this negotiation. It's not always just the one person that's at the table with you. Find all the barriers to why this person would not want to make a deal with you. And by bringing those barriers out into the open, you're actually able to get a real yes, not a placating yes. So example he gives of a salesman that uses a script to get successive yeses out of you, but you don't actually say yes because you want to. So he talks about a salesman selling, I don't know, water purifiers or something. And the call goes, do you enjoy drinking water? Yeah, of course. I have to answer yes. Do you like your water to be clean? Yes, of course. But by the second one, you know where this is going. You're like, this guy is trying to sell me a water purification thing. So instead of starting the sales call, he says, is this a good time to talk? You should say, is this a bad time to talk? If you start this way, you take pressure off of people to give you a fake yes. They will either say, no, this is a bad time to talk. And they'll usually tell you a good time to talk. Or they will say, yeah, it's fine. And I used the example of my wife trying to get me to go to a birthday party. And we had a very busy week. And I have an introvert meter that, when my social battery fills up for a week, that's it. Like anything else puts me into a distressful state. And if she had said something like, feel free to say no, she would have made me feel comfortable to say no. And I probably would have just said yes. As it turned out, I said, no, absolutely not. And the minute I said that, my brain actually started to run scenarios of what it would be like to go to the party and try and figure out a way that I could go because I love her and I want to support her. So the minute I felt safe to maintain my autonomy and independence, I was more apt to meet her in the middle. And he talks about that. If you let people feel safe to say no, they actually feel safe to ponder the situation and consider how they could make it work. Chris's negotiating career actually starts with a no. He goes to the officer in the NYPD in charge of the special task force and asks her to join. She flat out says no. She asks for his qualifications, degrees in psychology, experience, background. He has none. And instead of trying to fudge it or talk himself up, he says, I have no experience. I have none of those things, but doesn't back down from his request. So she looks at him. She admires his persistence. She tells him, there is one thing you can do. Go volunteer at a suicide hotline. Thinking he won't do it because this is her out that she's probably used a dozen times. And she tells him later, no one's ever done it, but he does it. And so he goes to volunteer at a suicide hotline where he learns a ton about human psychology and how to talk to people. He talks about we are indoctrinated with the need to be nice to people. People know this is disingenuous. I think other cultures are less dramatic about this than America, but America, Canada, oh my God, Canada.
Well, and even in the US, it's very regional.
Yeah,
well.
It's pretty regional, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely. Or there's definitely regional patterns. But yeah, no, I thought this chapter was interesting because he talks about we have this reaction to the word no, but it has a lot of meanings. So It could mean I'm not ready to agree yet. I need more information. I need to talk it over with somebody else, or you're just making me feel uncomfortable. So assessing like, what does this actually mean? And asking questions like, what about this doesn't work for you? Or what would you need to make it work? And it says reasons to look at no as a positive and as a step forward is some of the purposes it provides are allowing real issues to be brought forth, protecting people from making ineffective decisions, slowing things down so people can freely embrace their decisions and the agreements they enter into, helping people feel safe, secure, emotionally comfortable, and in control of their decisions, and moving everyone's efforts forward. I talk a lot about yes in my work and in yes and being the cornerstone of improv, but I think it's an interesting argument for some places no is actually a good thing.
I think yes, and you're being collaborative in your approach to problem solving.
It's like different uses, different use cases, different places.
Yeah. Well, this is you asking questions. The yes and is more like about you going along with something somebody else is already saying.
Yeah, and that's more for like creativity, brainstorming, like idea, like generative thinking versus more analytical thinking.
The generative thinking, I think, is the thing. Okay. Chapter 5. Trigger the 2 words that immediately transform any negotiation. And I'm going to work on this because I'm not doing this well. Using a summary to let the other side feel heard is incredibly powerful. Paraphrasing plus a label equals summary. And what you're trying to get to, what you're trying to get out of them is, that's right. And when they say that, you've hit negotiation or just interaction gold because you've connected with them and connected with the way they're feeling or what they're thinking. And when you get that's right, that is someone that knows that you hear them.
Yeah. Yeah, they feel understood. And I also thought it was interesting, just like where he says, you want to say, it seems like you are feeling this way, as opposed to, I'm hearing that you're feeling this way. In this case, you want to not hear the you within it. So again, you don't want it to center on you. So if they're saying you're right, that's not a good thing, because a lot of times people are just saying that to get you to stop bothering them so you'll go away. But it's the that's right is the language you're looking for.
Yeah, the you're right is, fine, you're right, leave me alone.
Yeah. Okay,
you're right. That's fine. You're right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And he talks about several tactics. A lot of these are used in other places in the books, but things that you can use to get to that's right. So effective pausing, which is like using silence, using like minimal encouragers, he calls them, to convey that they have your full attention. So that's things like, yes, okay, uh-huh, I see.
Well, and that goes back to coaching habit. Like, what's on your mind? And what else?
Yeah.
And what else?
They relate, for sure.
And what else?
Mirroring, labeling your feelings, which we've talked about both of. Paraphrasing, which is useful in many contexts, but this really is about active listening, right? So repeating what they say, not just in their words, which is you're doing a lot of that's like coming down to mirroring, but also paraphrasing. So repeating what they're saying in your own words, because that really shows that you understand what they're saying. You're not just like parroting what they're saying. And it looks like you want to say something, Mike.
No, I'm just looking at you because you're beautiful.
Oh, well, that's cute. I'll leave that in. That's
leave
adorable.
That in.
Yeah.
Kristen's beauty is not just her physical beauty. I fell on, apparently I'm what is it? Sapiosexual.
Oh, yeah.
And the more I found out how smart she was, the more interested in her I became. So it's a combination of a lot of things, and listening to you talk, definitely like, it's like, oh, you're so you're smart. Like, so anyway, sorry.
Well, that's cute.
Let's try some webbing. It seems like you're very touched by that appreciation.
Yeah. Well,
as she twirls her hair.
Oh my God.
And blushes and laughs. If we were at a bar, I probably could get her number at this point.
I guess marry somebody who can make you blush after you're already married. I don't know. Anyway.
Anywho.
So the last one is summarizing. So this is actually a combination of both rearticulating the meaning of what is said as well as acknowledging the emotions underlying that meaning. So that's one of the next level is you're both rearticulating what they're saying and what that actually means and like what they're feeling about it. So those are all effective ways to get somebody to say that's right or equivalent.
Chapter 6, bend their reality. We compromise on a lot of deals and we compromise in life because it's easy and safe. And most of us have gone into even just the normal negotiation that normal workers is the salary negotiation of the way. And we don't have much guts in that regard. We'll take the first offer. It's very hard to go through the negotiation and be uncomfortable. So we're conditioned to be nice to people. We're conditioned not to upset people. And consequently, we don't always ask for what we actually want. And the passage of time and its sharper cousin, the deadline, is one of the most effective techniques in negotiation. He has a kidnapping example in Haiti, where there's a lot of kidnappings in Haiti while this is going on. Everybody's getting kidnapped. And they're asking for outrageous sums, millions of dollars. But the more he digs into it with like calibrated questions, he uses the passage of time to make people uncomfortable. They find that so many of the kidnappings are happening on Thursday and Friday. And what the kidnappers really want is party money. And as soon as he finds this out, he's like, okay, now I know how much money we actually need to get this person back. We don't need $1 million. We need $7,000. Because for $7,000, they can have a rip-roaring time over the weekend. And it's crazy, but they were able to figure that out. I mean, who would have thought? People that have damage in the part of the brain that handles emotions often cannot even make small decisions.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
So interesting. They can't even decide what do they want for dinner. They can still reason very effectively, but they have real trouble making decisions. So fascinating. Like the way the brain's developed over millennia and the things that stop us from like being effective in life or understanding ourselves or our own emotions. And a lot of it is just like these parts of the brain not being super integrated yet. So we have some more evolution to go, I guess. Okay.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful words in negotiations, both positive and negative, is the word fair.
Yeah, which is interesting. And he says he'll even bring it in early in a negotiation. He'll bring in the word like, I want you to feel like you're being treated fairly at all times.
Yeah, he says that. And he says, along with that, if at any time you don't feel like we're behaving fairly, please stop and we'll address it. And I think that's a genius way to go into a discussion or negotiation.
For sure.
People, again, you're making people feel safe. They can object if they want to, like, hey, this isn't, I actually don't feel this is fair. Let's talk.
State as much as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to understanding prospect theory from Daniel Kahneman, who describes how people choose between prospects that involve risk. And of course, we've talked about this a little bit, but it is far more involved than we can address here or that I actually understand. Of course, we know loss aversion is more powerful than seeking gain. And it's not enough to demonstrate that you can give the other person what they want. They actually have to believe that they have something concrete to lose by not dealing with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. Definitely a very strong cognitive bias.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he has like a lot of tactics for, so like understanding like prospect theory in general, like things that you can do to help use that to your advantage. So part of it is anchoring their emotions, starting out with the accusation audit that he talks about. So you're basically acknowledging all their fears, which you can then use to like frame things as loss aversion, right? Once you've acknowledged their fears. When it comes to monetary negotiations, letting the other side start. So they're anchoring the conversation. Or if you do name things first, always using a range instead of a single number.
You told me that when I was interviewing for jobs. You're saying,
yeah,
when they ask you for salary, you can say, well, I'm currently interviewing for jobs between X and X plus, 35K or something.
Yeah.
And then they're going to come in not at the top, but they're also probably not going to come in at the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It's great advice I heard many years ago
Yeah.
as far as
That I've viewed,
salvation.
and they have come in, my negotiations have come in much closer to where I actually wanted them to go.
It's a very effective way to do it.
It's super effective. You set your value without being too dramatic about it or being like, this is the number I need. Well, this is the range that I'm current. And it's honest too. Like, I'm not actually interviewing for jobs that pay X minus 50 or something.
It feels more cooperative.
It's cooperative.
Too.
Yeah.
You're not like, I need this. You're like, here's the range we're working with. And then that also leads into non-monetary terms too. So pivoting to non-monetary terms, bolstering the offer with things other than monetary aspects. So especially things that are not important to you, but are potentially important to the other person. So this gets into
or even not to let them know you've reached your
or at the
limit.
end. Yeah.
You're like, I'll throw in a pony. And then they're like, he's got no more money. He's offering the pony. Okay, that's the best offer.
Yeah, he talks about that at some point. I forget where.
It's pretty late in the...
This is the way to end. Just show this
is the way to end. Yeah.
Yeah, throw in something else.
And the kitchen sink. Okay, fine. That's the top offer I'm getting for this.
And then he says and I know you don't necessarily agree with this.
Well, I've changed my mind a little bit since we put the notes together.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of different angles from this. He's definitely not wrong.
Yeah, I don't think from being a marketing major in college and stuff, like studying this stuff, I actually agree with this. But what he says is when you do talk numbers, use odd ones. Round numbers tend to feel like a placeholder. I mean, you see this in pricing everywhere, right? Like it's used in a lot of places. But yeah, when something is too round of a number, it doesn't feel as real to people. And whereas like non-rounded numbers, and especially in the context of negotiation, feel like the result of a thoughtful calculation.
Yeah, when you get to $423.59, people think, well, he must have done some calculation.
Wow, you must be like doing some work to get to that number. Yeah, just say there's a lot of these psychological tricks that are used in marketing, and once you know about them, you see them everywhere. And then the last one he talks about is you can also take the tactic of starting with like an extremely low anchor that they then reject, and then you can surprise them with something that's unrelated. That's like a bonus. So that like triggers the reciprocity response. He talks about reciprocity in a couple places, but this also is covered in one of my favorite books on the psychology of how to influence people, which is Influence by Robert Cialdini, which I've mentioned before. But reciprocity is a big one.
Yeah. And I think different of the three archetypes respond to reciprocity differently. I can't remember exactly where they are, but I know as an analyst personality, if I give you something of this value, I kind of expect it will be calculated in there somehow. Where I think the driver personality, if they give you something, they expect something back. Maybe they're not as calculating as the value, the numerical value, but they expect like loyalty or something like that, Okay. So he uses the example of, again, as Kristen said, using extreme anchoring and an accusation audit. He had to hire some contractors for a government job who they normally get $2,000 a day, but he only had a budget of $500 a day. And instead of calling and saying apologetically, hey, the best I can do is $500, he starts with an accusation audit of himself. And he says, at the end of this call, you're going to think I'm terrible at my job. I'm a terrible businessman, and maybe even he's lying to me. You've already earned some trust by putting that at the fore. And especially if they know you a little bit, they're like, no, I don't think that about you. You're a great guy. And they're more open to hearing what he has to say. And in the end, they all take the gig.
Well, and the other thing that he said that triggered that was
loss aversion.
Yeah, loss aversion. I wanted to bring you this opportunity before I took it to somebody else.
Yep.
So then because people were like, oh, like this is about losing it to your competitors, they're like, sure, I'll take that rate.
I'm sure this man is very successful in negotiations. I wouldn't want to have him on the other side of any table I'm sitting at. Yeah. Even though we are deeply emotional and irrational beings, there are biologic patterns to our behaviors, and he has ways to exploit them. In general, no deal is better than a bad deal, right? And that's something that is, I think, just not wired into us. We're somehow wired to come to consensus and be agreeable. And I think you reach a certain level when you can walk away from something that isn't right for you. Probably in relationships too, right? Lots of people are in relationships that they just de facto fell into or kept going. Kristen's told me many times, like at some point it's easier just to get married than it is to break up. So,
Yep.
And he goes, and this is the crux of his book, Never Split the Difference. So he gives an example of he gets up and he wants to wear black shoes, but his wife's, you should wear brown shoes. And instead he compromises and he has one black and one brown shoe. So who won in that scenario? Not either one of them, you know? Okay. Chapter 7, create the illusion of control. Asking for help works. And this is back to his first question. How am I supposed to do that? He uses this question as his main weapon, like a boxer's jab. And he fights behind it. I don't know how I can do that. How am I supposed to do that? I don't know. I don't know how I'll make that happen. And
yeah, it's good.
It's so good. That's the boxer's jab, you know? The jab is I'm not a boxer, central punch. And you can build a whole game around the jab. It creates distance between you and your opponent. You can actually hit someone quite effectively, and it sets up all your other shots. And no matter what happens, they have to deal with your jab. So while they're dealing with that, they're leaving the stomach open or their abdomen open or the side open or something where you have another. If you want to see that, watch Nate Diaz fight. Okay. So use open-ended questions. Who, what, when, why, and how. What and how are best. Why can some sound like an accusatory question and can often backfire? Kristen says, this is coaching 101.
Yeah. If you listen to our episode on the coaching habit, this will sound familiar. It's like stick with questions. Let's start with what and how.
Yeah.
Yep.
How am I supposed to do that? What do you need to make this work? Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. Instead of, does this look like something you would like, which is a yes or no question, ask, how does this look to you? So it's open-ended. And I'm trying to wrap my head around this too. What is a calibrated question? What is an open-ended question? But it's really questions that don't have a definitive or a yes or no answer. Yes or no is binary. Non-binary. So you're inviting narrative from the person. What about this works for you? What about this doesn't? What would you like to do? And they'll tell you. What is the biggest challenge you face? That's a coaching question right there. Yep. What about this is important to you? How can I make this better for us? How would you like to proceed? What about this works for you? Doesn't work for you? How can we solve this problem? What are we trying to accomplish here? Yes, to all of this. Open-ended questions are so useful because they will teach you something about your negotiating counterpart. All negotiation is information gathering. It is like martial arts. It doesn't matter if it's boxing or jiu-jitsu. Often the beginning, first round of the match is you figuring out what your opponent will do in certain scenarios, watching for patterns of their footwork, of their handwork. And the more information you gather in the beginning, you're going to form a game plan that's going to go through their game plan. You can calibrate questions to give people the illusion of control. It works very well with people who are arrogant or egotistical. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, like if you're on a bad date and you're just trying to get through it to the point where you can leave. Yeah. Asking questions about themselves is a really great way to do it. Yeah. Many applications, right?
And then all of a sudden you peel off to the bathroom and don't come back.
I never did that, for the record.
Really?
Yeah. No. At least I'm polite, tell people I'm leaving.
I thought you said you didn't date anyone before me.
Oh, is that what I said?
Yes, you told me that. Okay.
I'm pretty sure there's evidence to the contrary on this very podcast, but you know.
I don't remember that.
Uh-huh. But yeah, the other thing he talks about with this maintaining the illusion of control that's absolutely critical is your own emotional regulation. So the two tips he gives for that are to take a pause and give yourself time to collect your thoughts before responding. And if you are like verbally assaulted, a good response is a calibrated question or open-ended question, which is really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chapter 8, guarantee execution. So again, I'm not that experienced with doing deals in business, not really. I hire vendors, things like that. I hire people, but I don't negotiate deals that involve some sort of future execution. Like we do a deal and all of a sudden there's an office building going up or something like that. It's a more, so he says, yes is nothing without how. A deal is no good without execution. So I think a lot of deals get done and then nothing happens for them to follow through. Because again, people can give you like a tacit yes. So he has a prison riot and they work to negotiate with the hostage takers and they agree to come out, but they in a successive series of surrenders. And part of the deal is the first people to surrender and who are going to be relocated will be given a radio in which they can radio back to the other hostage takers and let them know that they're okay and that they didn't get brutalized or beat up by the cops. And they neglect to figure out the operational aspect of this. And those first surrendees do not receive a radio. And in fact, the people who take their surrender are like, what do you mean give them a radio? That's insane. And so they have to go back to the drawing board and fix all this. But so the deal is no good without the how. An agreement is nice. A signed contract, even better, but it's not done until you have the check in your hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love this phrase. Negotiation is the art of letting someone else get your way.
So they think it's their idea.
Yep. That's real winning.
Yeah.
And the art of war, it's like win from 1,000 miles away. Yeah. Do you want to win or do you want to be the one seen to be winning? The people who really know how to win aren't after the image or the glory. They just want what they want.
Right.
You know. 2 questions you can ask at the beginning to let the other person feel in control and get them to own the execution are, how will we define success? How will we get back on track if we get off track? Such powerful questions.
Yeah, those are great questions.
So good.
There's so much packed into this chapter.
There's so much in here.
Tactics.
It's so much tactics. And they're the tactics of letting other people win also. I find Western negotiating is very black and white. It's I win, you lose. And I think real winning is maybe I win, you win. Maybe I win a little more, or I get the part of winning that I really want, but I don't need to also crush you to feel like I've won. And if you see anyone like that in the modern political landscape, that's up to you whether that's your style. But I think there's enough winning out there for everybody. So let them feel like they're winning and in charge. It's important to discover players not at the table. You can do this by asking questions like, how does this affect the rest of your team? What do the rest of your team see as the biggest challenges here? And in sales, they'll actually teach you to, when we were in hotel sales, they're like, who else is involved in making this decision? What is your team's criteria? Because it's a lot of times there's power players that are not seen.
Yep.
The deal killers can be more powerful than the deal makers. He uses the 7-38-55 rule, and those are very odd numbers too. So
I'm assuming it comes from a study.
I'm assuming it does, but 38 is off the wall. Okay, so 7% of information comes from the words being said. 38 comes from tone of voice, FM, late night radio DJ voice. Which also, he doesn't say male. I'm sure there's...
No, he doesn't.
There's female radio DJs, overnight DJs who have a nice calming voice. And then 55% comes from body language. And interestingly enough, when we started this podcast, we had to re-situate ourselves around the table because the microphones and their, what is this, the diffuser, sound diffuser, what is this called?
It's a pop filter.
Pop filter that's in front of us was covering our mouths, and I couldn't get enough information about what Kristen was saying, and I was like, is she mad at me? Is she in a rush? Has she had enough of me today?
I was not mad at him.
But
yeah.
I couldn't see like the lower part of her face, and that was actually a problem during the pandemic with masks.
Yes.
I hear you talking, I see your eyes, but I'm missing half of the body language information that I need. We should do an episode on body language. It's not always as definitive as people like, oh, if you look up to the left, you're being deceptive. It's not like that. It's much more complicated than that. But your limbic brain is garnering subconscious information from that. And we had to relocate our...
adjust how we seat ourselves at the table. Yeah.
55% comes from body language. Look for incongruities between someone's words and their body language. That's a good one.
Yep.
If you find disparities, you can use calibrated questions and labeling. And I think this is so powerful and kind of beautiful that most people will be too afraid to say something like this, but say, I heard you say yes, but I'm sensing hesitation. Or I heard you agree, but it seems like you might have other thoughts. Oh, that's a powerful question.
A lot of that's just trusting your intuition about reading people. Because
even if you're
usually
wrong,
we know, right? Because we're picking up on things. But
even if you're wrong, just stopping the flow and saying something, you're going to get some more information out of people. Okay.
Yeah, and it could be something completely different going on with their body language that has nothing to do with the deal you're talking about. So, if you get it out there, you're more likely to move forward.
As I correct the spelling of counterfeit. Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
We may come back to these notes some days. And I'll tell you what, I use these in business a little bit when I'm going into a one-on-one or a conversation. Sometimes, like I have some one-on-ones to do this week, and I'm going to actually go back through here and pull some of these questions out.
Nice.
Because I'm working with a new team now, and I'm still getting to know them. So my old team, a little bit, and I miss you guys if you're listening. Miss you guys a lot. I think about you all the time.
Oh.
But for them, I could just do coaching habit stuff. I already knew them. We already built trust. But now it's like back to the square one, building trust, getting in there, finding the roadblocks, the obstacles to success. So I think some of these questions are great. Okay. Look for incongruities, calibrate questions. Rule of three. And for those of you who are cool, you will know that this is not the Sith rule of two.
It's also not the improv rule of three.
Was there an improv rule of three?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, it's like basically like if you're listing things, there needs to be 3 things. And if you go more than 3, then you need to go to 5. And if you do more than 5, you're just doing it the rest of the scene, usually. But yeah, things come in these.
The rest of the scene?
Yeah. So if you do something twice in improv, that's gets a good reaction. You want to do it a 3rd time. If you're listing things, you want to say 3 things or 5 things. It's just like, it's an improv rule.
Improv rule?
Yeah. Which can be broken like all rules, right? But they're foundational. He's smiling at me again. It's cute.
Aw. Foundational?
Oh, God. Stop mirroring me.
So she took a minute to figure it out, but she's an analyst. She's not a driver. But I did it at least twice to her without her noticing.
Well, he was doing it with just a goofy smile on his face,
Well,
too.
I wanted to know more. I didn't know about this, but you'll see if you rewind, I used a couple mirrors. Probably not great. I'm, again, an analyst and goofy. But I mirrored the last 2 or 3 words that she said, and I found out more. And now I know more about the rule of 3. I didn't know what that was at all. Sith rule of 2 is there's only 2 Sith because it's, I don't know, read The Legend of Darth Bane. It's a pretty good book. Now I know the rule of 3. And so that's how you use mirrors. I won't say that's a great execution of it, but I got at least 2 out of her before she noticed something.
Before I was like, what's going on?
I really thought the second one you were going to notice, but you did not. You just were kind of...
But you were asking me questions about something that I like talking about. So there you go.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah.
Okay. There are back to the rule of 3. There are 3 types of yes. The commitment yes, the confirmation yes, and the counterfeit yes. People are very good at the counterfeit yes.
Yeah, which is I just want to end this conversation or...
Yeah, I'm just agreeing with you because I know I can slide you back out the door. Yep. It's almost like a Wing Chun stripping of your hand on my... Yeah, you can... Okay. Rule of 3 is...
Whereas the confirmation yes is I agree, but I'm not actually committing to any action. Yeah. Versus the commitment yes is the actual okay, let's do this.
Yep. Rule of 3 is getting the other party to agree to the same thing 3 times in the same conversation. I think this goes back to that's right. When you get that's right, that's like the confirmation yes or commitment yes. I don't know. It's the affirmative yes that they're actually saying yes.
Yeah, and this is a good, I think, just when you're thinking about selling in general, getting somebody to commit 3 times, and maybe the first time it's closer to a counterfeit yes, but by the end it's a commitment yes.
Yeah. That's why you get to know first. If you get to know 5 times and then they say yes, they really mean it. Yeah, because you've already made them safe to feel no. Okay, watch for telltale signs of lying. This can include using overly complex sentences and unnecessary words, body language that does not match up with the tone of voice, or the words being said. People who are important in the situation will often not use personal pronouns like I and my. They will refer to we and us. And I don't know, I see the CEO going, we want. Our expectations are, well, he means him, but he's elevated enough in his kung fu to not refer to himself like that. And I don't think it's just like the royal we. He knows he has the power. He's not trying to make himself feel more important. He's just trying to get something done.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing he talks about in this chapter that I like is about saying no. So we talked more about like getting the other person to say no, but like for you saying no in a conversation, he's like, you can express say no 4 times usually before actually just saying no. So like the first is like, how am I supposed to do that? The second is your offer is very generous. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me or something like that. And then number 3, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I just can't do that.
Yeah, you know, those 3, like if you say that, they're going to try and they're going to negotiate with themselves and, well, can we do this then? What about if I did that? Because they want, and you're going to expose them as wanting to make a deal and you're going to find their boundaries.
Yeah. And if somebody's still really persistent, then it's like, I'm sorry, no. And then finally just no. But I thought this is also useful for not just negotiating, but like anybody who has people-pleasing tendencies and needs help with saying no. I think these are some really good ways to say it.
So I want to give a quick plug. Jefferson Fisher, he's a lawyer on Instagram. I think he has a podcast now in Houston, and he gives people coaching or advice on how to negotiate or how to be assertive. And one of the things he talks about is the downward inflection. He's like, if you're talking to your boss, like, hey, when you get a minute, can we talk about my bonus? Sounds very different than, hey, when you get a minute, can we talk about my bonus? And it has a different, like, it hits different in the brain. So he's actually got a lot of cool, very quick, like 30-second videos on a lot of this stuff that I find super useful. Let's check him out. Maybe we can link him in the comments.
Yep.
He's got a lot of stuff like how to just deal with negativity, how to deal with narcissists, how to deal with people insulting you, it's super interesting stuff.
Nice. Yeah.
We should link him because his stuff is really on point. And really is about being self-confident and regulated and not following other people's BS. And I like it. Chapter 9, Bargain Hard. Chris Voss will negotiate. He says, I will negotiate past where most people will split the difference. And he elucidates his strategy of the bargaining phase. He talks about knowing what archetype you are. There's 3 broad. He said he found 19 with him and his son, and they whittled that down to 3 broad categories: the accommodator, the analyst, and the assertive. I say the accommodator is like the talker. You could also say like a diplomat. They generally believe that as long as people are talking, they're making progress. The analysts, like my wife and myself, we're the thinkers, the planners. We want numbers. We consider carefully lots of I think you get the idea. And with each of these, we have strengths and weaknesses. That the analysts, obviously, we get too bogged down in numbers sometimes. We get information paralysis, right? The accommodators aren't actually, they're talking, but they're not actually accomplishing anything. And then the last is the assertives. Those are the drivers. They're I think more the stereotypical leader.
Time is money.
Time is money. Let's go. I'm in charge.
Yep.
The analysts were methodical and diligent and not in a big rush. Our self-image is often linked to minimizing mistakes. That tracks. Classic analysts prefer to work on their own. Also tracks. Can speak in a way that is distant and cold and or sometimes arrogant and may put their counterpart at ill ease. Can confirm. We are generally reserved problem solvers, information aggregators, and we are hypersensitive to reciprocity. If we give you $1,000 value, we expect that back, not out of a sense of loyalty, but just out of math. Don't expect immediate counter proposals with these people. It is vital to be prepared. Use data to drive your argument. Avoid surprises. Please avoid surprises. We don't like that. Silence displayed for us is an opportunity to think, not talk. If you're talking in every pause in the conversation, we will be annoyed with you. We are trying to work things out. Please shut the up and let us let us think. Apologies have little value to us. So true. Just the facts, ma'am. We respond very well to labels because we are often misunderstood and we often misunderstand ourselves and we're not always super emotionally in tune. And we don't respond well to calibrated questions. This all really tracks. Okay. Section 2, the accommodator, you call it the diplomat. The most important thing for them is the time spent building relationships. So I think you can see that is a very positive thing, right? And an analyst might miss that part. We miss the importance of the human relationship connection. I'll say robotic, but we're more facts-based. For accommodator, as long as there is a free exchange of information and conversation, they feel like they are making progress. They love the win. As long as they are communicating, they're happy. Oh my God, they drive me nuts. Goal is to be on great terms. Of the 3 types, the most likely to build rapport without accomplishing anything.
Yeah, if you have like 2 accommodators together.
So tracking, right? They're just like, hey, you're the best. No, you're the best. And then if we forget to do the deal, guys, okay. They're easy to talk to and friendly, will yield a concession to appease or acquiesce if their counterpart is sociable and friendly. Ask them calibrated questions about implementation, like, how are you going to carry this out? And I will say, I remember now, having read this book, I started to work on the other 2 archetypes on myself. I'm like, I need to work to build relationships more, and I need to learn to drive better. And at some point, we'll do the first 90 days, which has... Yeah,
I think that's our next book,
actually.
Is it?
So it has 5 different types of scenarios that you can go into as a leader. There's the turnaround, there's the startup, there's sustaining success, there's accelerating growth, and I don't remember the 5th one, but each one has a different character that is best for it. And the turnaround, the most effective personality type for that is the driver. You need somebody, it's a chaotic mess. You need somebody that goes in there and says, don't worry, I'm in charge. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And they do that for 6 months and they turn the place around. And that wasn't my natural makeup. And after COVID, I went to the hotel in San Francisco. It was a real turnaround situation. And instead of like my normal like spreadsheet long-term analytical thinking, I just needed to drive things to survive the day. So these are all things that you need in your personality makeup to be successful in different scenarios. Back to accommodator. Uncovering their objections can be difficult as they may leave issues unaddressed out of fear of the conflict that may arise. My wife doesn't have this problem. Be conscious of excessive chit-chat where nothing gets done. And the assertive personality. Time is money. Every wasted minute is a wasted dollar. Getting the solution perfect is far less important than getting it done. I think everyone is envisioning this person. They love winning, and they will do so at the expense of others at times. They are direct and candid and have an aggressive communication style. Business relationships are based on respect. Above all, they want to be heard, and this is why mirrors work well with them, and can't hear your point of view until they have expressed theirs. It's fascinating. They tell rather than ask. When you are dealing with assertive types, it is best to focus on what they have to say. Once they are convinced you understand them, then and only then will they listen to your point of view. To them, silence is an opportunity to speak more. Mirroring is excellent to use with them. They love it. They respond to calibrated questions and labels. Not great at reciprocity, interestingly enough. If you are an assertive, focus on moderating your tone. You're probably scaring people. Each of these types view time, preparation, relationships, and money differently. They also have very different views and practices of silence. Can I confirm?
Yep.
Identifying your counterpart's type. So we often project our own style on the other side, and this is the golden rule fallacy. We assume that others want to be treated as the way we want to be treated, and that's not true. They may be very different than you.
Yeah.
You can't assume that and I was doing this for a while. I assumed everybody had like kind of Gen X desires and hopes in their life. And I was getting all these like new millennials and Gen Z, and they have a very different different viewpoint, and they start to, everybody's really different. So don't assume that because you understand your own style that the person you're talking to shares that. They may be vastly different than you. Don't treat other people as you want to be treated. Treat them as they need to be treated. The psychological judo of negotiations can include the use of tactical anger, as long as it's genuine and channeled well.
Yeah, I also like that he has some ways in here to show assertion if you're a, nice, maybe people-pleasing, conflict-avoidant person. So one of them is to use why questions. This is one of the exceptions for focusing on what and how questions. But a question like, why did you do that, can really knock the other person back and make them think about what they're saying.
This is the stuff Jefferson Fisher is really good at sharing.
Nice.
This kind of like judo negotiation.
Nice. And then using I statements to set a boundary. So like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me is a way to do that. And then basically being ready to walk away.
That's
and
powerful.
Like doing whatever it takes to make yourself be okay with walking away, which is hard.
That's a dating thing too. Yeah, very powerful stuff. Then he goes into some actual techniques to bring into your negotiation. He uses the Ackerman model. Set your target price, set your first offer at 65% of your target price, and then calculate 3 raises of decreasing intensity, 85%, 95%, and then 100%. So your fourth offer should be your last one. Use empathy and lots of different ways of saying no to get the other side to increase their offer. Often they will negotiate with themselves. It's so true. Well, I don't know that from making people do that. I know that from doing it on my own.
Yeah.
I could do it for less. Okay. When calculating the final amount, use precise non-round numbers. $423,000 sounds better than 420 or 430 for some reason. For a final offer, throw in a non-monetary item, sometimes something they don't even want. Here's your pony. Okay, they're done negotiating. They offered the pony. This gives them the idea that you've reached your absolute limit. 65% of your target price is an extreme anchor that will often drive your counterpart very quickly to their price limit. It can induce shock and a fight or flight reaction. So he's using these tactical, tactical, not the reverse of empathy, to get them to potentially rush into action. The raises are dropped in sparingly, adding calibrated questions. These offers often work on reciprocity. The diminishing increases also give your counterpart the idea that they are reaching or getting you to your actual limit. I think that's smart, right? You go from 65 to 85. Okay, so if I plan to pay you $100,000 for this boat and I start at 65K, you're like, wow, that's almost 50% of what I think it's worth. And they might meet you at 75K or something like that. And then when you go to 85, you're like, all right, and that sounds good. And then 95 is a far lower increase, and they start to see the reduction in your increases. And psychologically, they're like, we're almost where he's going to get, and that's it. So anyone who's bid on an item on eBay or sold something on eBay is probably familiar with that process. Research indicates people who get concessions feel better about the bargaining process than someone who gets a single fair offer, even when they pay more, which is nuts. Humans are illogical beings. Psychology.
Yep.
And chapter 10, find the black swan.
The final chapter. Which, by the way, I have to hand it to Chris Voss. I feel like in most of the books we read, the last 2 chapters are like the fluffiest. He has a meaty stuff in these last 2 chapters. So
he's not an academic, and I mean he is, right? But he's not an academic learner. He was a Kansas City beat cop. Like, this man is from the, I don't know. I got a lot out of this book, and he's a little bit more out there in the zeitgeist lately. I've seen him on a lot of podcasts lately, including Jocko's.
Of course.
But a lot, like, and I don't know. So I should find out more about him. Anyway, chapter 10, find the black swan. The black swan was something for a long time that was thought impossible, because in England, there was no such thing as anything other than a white swan. So people who said something about a black swan, it was slang or idiom for something that doesn't exist or can't be possible. And it wasn't until someone around 1700 I don't know, Captain Cook, who knows, journey to Western Australia that someone actually saw a black swan. In general, both sides of a negotiation will have between 1 and 3 black swans. This is information that were it to be discovered by the other parties, it would change everything. And sometimes these black swans are unknown to you as well. And that's why,
like your own black swan.
Your own black swan are unknown to you.
Yeah.
And that's why if somebody can dig through your stuff well enough, they'll elicit from you, that's right.
You're right.
And that's a black swan. And you're like, that is what I'm after. And, feeling for the truth behind the camouflage. Intuition plays a huge part in negotiations. Why are they communicating what they are communicating right now? While these black swans seem like they should be some giant revelation, often they are seemingly innocuous, and both parties may be oblivious to. He goes on to describe leverage as a judiciario. I love this concept. A leverage is the fluid that splashes between two parties back and forth. It's the ability to inflict loss and withhold gain. Those are leverage. There are 3 types. There's positive leverage, your ability as a negotiator to either provide or withhold things that your counterpart wants. Negative leverage, which is what most people think of as leverage, your ability to make your counterpart suffer. Potential losses will loom larger in the mind than commensurate gains. Negative leverage and threats often backfire. You can use negative leverage without actually using threats. It seems like you don't care about the position you're leaving me in is a good
Yeah, he warns against
label.
Using threats in general.
Yeah.
You can say something like that that indicates.
Despite being a driver and knowing that he's the assertive personality type, he has used techniques to ameliorate the severity of the way he talks to people. He does have a funny example of I think one of his sons just kept mirroring him for 45 minutes. And the other one was just cracking up laughing. And he was like, what? And he's like, you don't even realize that he's been doing this to you for an hour.
That's amazing.
Because they love talking about themselves, as do I. But I'll notice if you do that to me after about 6 minutes. And then normative leverage, which is using the other party's norms, standards, morals, etc., to advance your position. And he has an awesome description of this in this chapter. He says, know their religion. And it doesn't necessarily mean religion. It means their perspective on life, their morals, their worldview, and position your demands within their worldview. And you show them respect, and you're far more likely to trigger a sense of shared belonging in someone, and you're more likely to reach a consensus. So super smart.
Yeah. And then the last section in here, this is actually in the appendix, but very worth noting, is he takes you through the process of creating a one sheet to prepare for a negotiation. So that consists of identifying your goal, a summary of known facts. These are the things that will hopefully elicit a that's right from the other side. 3 to 5 labels, like potential labels, an accusation audit. So like thinking through what are the things they could think about you up front. 3 to 5 calibrated questions that you can potentially use. So what are we trying to accomplish? How does that affect things? What's the biggest challenge you face? Etc. Questions specifically to ferret out if there's any behind the table deal killers, deal killing issues. So questions to help understand if there's other things related that could be influencing it. So things like self-esteem, public perception, autonomy, perceived power dynamics, etc.
Those are really powerful ones that people gloss over, but these dynamics can play a public perception, and power dynamics, like unspoken power dynamics, can play a huge role in someone's willingness to do a deal or something with you. Like maybe you even just in the business where you take a job that you don't really love for less money than you want because it makes you feel a certain way about having that title, right? And knowing that can give you that leverage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then the last thing in this is coming up with some non-cash offers. So if this is a monetary negotiation, you would prep the things with the Ackerman model. So like figure out your 65%, 85%, etc. But also identifying potential non-cash offers that you can throw in. So I love this as a way to prepare for negotiation. I'm definitely going to
I want my pony. Don't pony.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that brings us to summary.
Okay, summation. They're not crazy. And I love this. People may be operating from motivations that are beyond your understanding, but you should try to find out what those are rather than just thinking the other side is crazy. And there was a part in How to Win Friends and Influence People, which I think is one of the most brilliant leadership books ever written, where he talks about like Abraham Lincoln telling his wife not to call the Southerners evil or crazy, because Lincoln says, don't say that about them because they're exactly what we would be if we were raised in those situations. So even though he drastically disagrees with their perspective, he's able to see how they got to it and not demonize them and that, I think, is the pathway to world peace and harmony. You might not understand people, but most people are not evil. They're just operating from a set of needs or the unspoken motivations or pressures or desires that are hard for them to express or hard for you to see. So people are not crazy. Find out what their point of view is and why, and you'll be farther along for it. Overcoming fear and learning to get what you want out of life. People generally fear conflict, even healthy conflict, And I don't know if conflict's the right word. Maybe it's like healthy disagreement or,
No, conflict is, I think part of the problem is conflict is not inherently negative.
Well, the word feels negative, though.
But it has a lot of negative connotations.
Yeah.
But
it's a cognitive bias. Okay.
Yeah.
People in close relationships often fail to make their needs and desires known. Yeah, I think we know all about that. When you are new to negotiations, you will experience a lot of fight and flight response. And that's true. And I've coached a lot of my team in their future. I'm like, okay, when you go into negotiations, you're going to need to talk about salary. Let me tell you a little about how I've become more comfortable doing that. And and prepare them. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to want to scream out a number. You're going to want to run away. You're going to want to take the first number that they say, but this is what you can actually command in the market. So knowing that will help you. And don't avoid honest, clear conflict. So that's it. Never Split the Difference. Chris Voss, great book. Should read it. Kristen, what didn't resonate?
So I think one thing that rubbed me the wrong way is he's pretty dismissive of getting to the book and like just academic theory of negotiations in general. And it goes in with this is why my approach is the best approach. I don't think that it should be thrown out. I actually think there's a lot of value in that book. And I think the best negotiators are actually going to pull tactics and techniques from both of these books. But I think these are really the two foremost books on negotiation. And I think there's a lot of value in both of them.
Nice. So, that kind of goes into what didn't resonate for me. Chris comes off as just a little bit smug, and I'm a little smug.
They feed into each other.
Just a little bit. But to be honest, I think some of it was the person they chose to do the narration. I wish they had.
He didn't do it?
No, I wish they had let him do it. He's an excellent speaker.
Huh. Surprising.
He does a lot of public speaking. I don't know why they didn't let him do it.
Yeah, that could have a lot.
And I do say maybe he has a right to be a little smug. He's he's negotiated with bank robbers and lots of terrorists. And I will say in the interviews I've seen him in on Jocko, just his stuff, he doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel super smug. So I can't judge the man. And the other thing, I don't 100% agree with the non-round number thing. And maybe it's because of my analytic personality. I know there's a psychology to it, but I also feel like everybody knows it at this point a little bit. I could be wrong.
Yeah. We'll move on, but we've talked about that already.
Kristen, what was your most life-changing takeaway?
I think there's so many good tactics in here. I found it really interesting actually that a lot of the foundations in it are things that are taught in improv and or coaching. So things like mirroring, labeling emotions, asking open-ended questions. So it was really interesting to see other potential applications for them. And there's just so many techniques in this book. I think it's very practical. There's a lot of stuff that I want to play with. I really like the one sheet model that he gives, the Ackerman model, etc. So I think there's a lot to take away and put into practice.
That's awesome.
What about you?
For me, the 3 archetypes are fascinating. I do think it's difficult, and I don't buy into the Myers-Briggs. Any study of people is going to yield you a certain amount of information. Generally, trying to classify people, I don't 100% agree with, except this part's true.
That's something I have strong opinions on that we can talk about at a later date.
Sure. My finding is these 3 archetypes are fairly accurate, and I make assumptions about people in the way that he said, not assumptions, but hypotheses about people when I first meet them and try and the first thing I try and do is figure out which of these 3 types they fit into. And then I can start to tailor my game to how do I talk to them so that they can hear me?
I love it.
And it also helped me figure out my own type and use an adapted style as necessary, as talked about. So I wholeheartedly think this part is genius. And a lot of great stuff in here. Highly recommended book. Sorry we missed a week. We're very chastised and chagrined about it. Not the right word.
At least we put out 25 consistent episodes.
Oh my God, we're on 26. We're a half
I guess
year.
it's okay.
We're doing all right. So thank you for joining us in 2025. This is our first episode in 2025. And
LBC in 2025.
did we have
We had an interview.
This is the first one we've recorded in 2025.
It's the first one we've actually recorded in 2025.
So I'm not working on the calendar of release because she does that work. I'm working. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for listening as always. And we're formulating our schedule for the first half of the year. The first 90 days is going to be our next book, I believe. But beyond that, if you have any strong recommendations or feelings like we should do this book first, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Put it in the chat or the comments, or I don't know how do people reach us, Kristen.
Via our website is
Via our
probably
website.
the easiest
Do
way.
we have a Facebook page?
No.
We have an Instagram.
I don't feel like now is the time to add Facebook.
I mean, sure.
Anyway, so we will end there. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. The Love and Leadership Podcast is produced and co-hosted by me, Kristen Brunn-Sharkey, and co-hosted by Mike Sharkey. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. We can't stress enough just how much these reviews help. You can follow us on LinkedIn under Kristen Brunn-Sharkey and Michael Sharkey, and on Instagram as Love Leader Pod. You can also find more information on our website, loveandleadershippod.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.